Hello, and welcome back to the Formal Review. Today, we'll be having a very special episode. Now sit back, maybe grab a drink, and let's talk about this movie.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Formal Review. This is Season 3, Episode 37, and I thank you all for tuning in once again. Now, this is a slightly different episode because I will be looking at an older film. I know I've kind of been doing this for the past few episodes. So on this episode, we will be looking at the 2005 film V for Vendetta. Like I said, obviously, not a new film. However, if you haven't been following me over the past few months, I've been slowly upgrading to 4K on a lot of movies, and this was one of them. And I was doing this in anticipation of getting my Xbox Series X, which I got last week. So as we are at a point where new movies are unlikely to come out in the near future, I thought I'd start reviewing older films that I rewatched in 4K because it is essentially a quote-unquote new movie for me. So I thought this could start a kind of new series on this, at least until we start seeing newer movies on a continual basis. And obviously we just passed November 5th, so I thought this would be a good movie to talk about on the first episode of this new series.
Remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgotten.
So in this episode, I'm going to be giving you my quick review of the Xbox Series X and my experience with it, my review for V for Vendetta, as well as my review of the film in 4K. So stay tuned. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. Like, how do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all the apps that people like to listen on? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to every single one of those questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing my podcast. And best of all, it's absolutely 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with some great sponsors. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. Again, that's anchor.fm/start. And I can't wait to hear your podcast. So, for those who don't know, this system is one of two new Xboxes, the Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S. The Series S is slightly cheaper and is digital only, and this is why I went for the Series X, as it can play 4K Ultra HD discs. So the big question that a lot of people ask is, why didn't I just purchase a designated 4K player? Well, personally, I really like having all-in-one system for gaming, video watching, and why did I choose this over the PS5? Well, the main reason is that I have been an Xbox fan pretty much since the original Xbox, but I didn't own one until the Xbox 360. Then when I got the Red Ring of Death after about 7 or so years, I upgraded the first Xbox One, and then now this. But frankly, when you look at the specifications, the Xbox Series X on paper is better than the PS5. I also found the new PS5 to be extremely ugly and tacky looking. You can be a Sony fan, you can be an Xbox fan like I am, but if you look at the actual specifications, and I'll get to that into a little bit, now, from a practical standpoint, they're not that much different. For any Sony fans out there listening, I do think it is a good system at the end of the day. I just have my own personal opinions of it. It's ugly, takes up too much space. I'm also not trying to say that the Xbox Series X is the best looking console out there, but I mean, that's subjective. It does look like a fridge. It's nothing fantastic, but it works perfectly for what I need, which is just something honestly basic looking that I can just put away. It can do what I need it to do, and then that's it. But anyway, also I like the Xbox controller more due to its joystick placement, and I know that there are PS5 controllers out there that you can get for this format, but they are quite expensive. And the other things I considered were storage, which the Xbox Series has more of. It has backward compatibility, PS5 does not, and then also the GPU is also slightly better than the PS5. I mean, a lot of these things are specification based, and most people aren't going to really really care about these types of things. But the biggest thing that I was really anticipating about was that it has DTS and Dolby Audio, and this is essential for me. And PS5 doesn't have anything like that aside from this 3D audio that is supposed to be similar, but they haven't really gone into detail of what that is, and no one really knows the technology of it. So at the end of the day, I go with the one that I can trust. Plus, it's something that won't look god awful in my space. I mean, it hides away pretty easily and it works exactly how I want it to, which is, frankly, the most important aspect of it. I mean, yes, some of the exclusive games to Sony are more likely better, and the next gen video game content is limiting, but I mean, that's going to eventually come anyway. So this is kind of more of an investment into my future, into something that I really enjoy. So I was really excited to get this product, and frankly, I can say that I am very impressed. And the main reason is because you get 4K video for both movies and video gaming. And right now, the Series X can run any game in full-on native 4K, which is different from any of the prior Xbox Ones where 4K support was compromised. Essentially, you had to choose between better graphics or higher frame rates. Now, you get both. The other big change is the emphasis on the frame rate. The Series X can consistently run games when there's content, obviously, at 120 frames per second, which gives a smoother gameplay. Yes, even for games that were made a year ago, do look more detailed with this hardware, and I mean, I've seen this. I legitimately think that just playing like the 1-year-old Madden game simply looks better on this system. It runs faster and it's really great. The refresh rate is ridiculously high as well, but for some people like me, this may not really do very much because a lot of televisions or AVRs have a slight issue with them. So the system is able to put out content that most television can't really process because a lot of them cap out at a 60 hertz frame rate. So to get the most out of the Xbox Series X and its capabilities, you not only need to get the Xbox itself, but also you have to get a new 4K television that supports the 120 hertz. And right now, there aren't very many of those on the market, and the ones that are out there are very expensive, especially around this time of year where a lot of decent 4K televisions are less than $700 during the Black Friday sales. And so for those who have AVRs like myself, even if your receiver says that it can process 4K speeds, there is a bug in the latest HDMI 2.1 chip, which is used in the new Denon, Marantz, and Yamaha HDMI 2.1 AV receivers. This bug essentially inhibits the pass-through of 4K at 120 hertz refresh rate and also 8K 60 hertz HDR content. And like I said, this is what unfortunately hurts me. My AVR cannot push through the 120 hertz 4K to my projector, even though it can handle it. Though I don't plan on getting a new AVR right now because as similar to TVs, there aren't very many out there, and the ones that are also very expensive. The price for AVRs that can process this to get down to a more affordable level may not be coming out until the end of 2021 or potentially into 2022. And frankly, I'm pleased to get the 4K that I do get, but more on that in a little bit because frankly, 4K is 4K, and a lot of movies usually get around, honestly, 60 hertz in general. A lot of them usually don't get that high, but when I would be upgrading to an AVR is potentially long way down in the future. There are like workarounds of it. You can plug in the Xbox directly into your TV and then use HDMI ARC, which can then transfer the audio back and forth. But for me, how I'm set up, it's not possible for me, and frankly, it doesn't really bother me that much. So I'm having a good time either way, and I really enjoyed this purchase. The Xbox load speeds are so off the hook. It's ridiculous to me how fast it goes. And again, this may just be because I upgraded from the original Xbox One and not the Xbox One X. So that may be the reason, but for me, that's such a drastic jump that I really feel that my purchase was unnecessary. Now, for those who aren't doing that much of a jump, maybe not. I don't really understand everyone out there who is willing to pay more than retail for this stuff, because even frankly, if I wasn't able to get the pre-order in, I wouldn't have bought the Xbox. Like, I don't think it's necessary to pay over retail for. Be financially conscious and only buy it if you can actually afford it, because otherwise it's really not worth it. Yeah, it looks really great, but you don't need these things. Hype value. Again, I'm talking about this like I really like it, but it took me a while to get to where I needed to be for it. So take your time, save your money. Don't spend more than retail for this. It's not really necessary. And honestly, you're just helping some person who bought 5 of them. I'm not a fan of those who put on bots and just try to buy these just for resale. It kind of takes away the point of it all. And frankly, it kind of screws up the people who actually want the order, because I mean, the person who gave it to me at my Best Buy, she was extremely nice and she wanted one, but she couldn't because it was back ordered. And frankly, that's sad. Like, I took mine home because I got lucky, but she couldn't because she didn't. And I get the hustle. You're doing what you can to make money, and I get that too. But you're hurting others for helping yourself. And again, respect the hustle on that aspect. But frankly, I feel it's honestly just hurting others in the long run. Anyway, now on to the movie at hand. So let's sit back, relax, grab your drinks, and let's discuss the movie. Now, before I get into anything regarding this movie, I do want to say, as with all episodes, there is a slight spoiler warning for those who haven't seen the film, and I will do my best not to ruin the movie for you. However, this movie did come out in 2005, so you have had time, but as always, I do suggest that if you haven't seen the movie and care about spoilers, definitely go watch it first and then come back and hear what I have to say about it. But if you don't care about spoilers, keep listening. No, I talk about this at the end, but the data shows that most people skip over that part. So I do want to reiterate the importance of leaving reviews on your favorite podcast service, because those reviews really help me grow and improve. A lot of you have talked to me offline, but I do really appreciate the reviews that already are out there. If everyone could just continue doing that, or letting me know any way that you think that I could grow and make this more entertaining, feel free, and I'll look at them and I'll grow as such. So V for Vendetta is a dystopian political action film directed by James McTeague and written by the Wachowskis. It is based on the 1988 DC limited series of the same name by Alan Moore and David Lloyd. It stars Natalie Portman, Hugo Weaving, Stephen Ray, Stephen Fry, and John Hurt. It takes place in 2027, where a fascist totalitarian regime has taken over the United Kingdom. The main character is V, played by Weaving, who is an anarchist and masked freedom fighter. He wants to ignite a revolution through elaborate terrorist acts, while Evie, played by Portland, gets caught up in his mission, and while Detective Finch, played by Ree, tries to stop him while figuring out the mystery of the man in the mask. As I said in the last episode, this was a purchase that didn't have a sale, and I got a gift set version of the movie, which included a few extra items that I was really excited for. I got a 32-page book, which highlighted some of the best content from the book V for Vendetta from film to script, a letter by the director, which highlighted the creation of film and the influence in the world today, and also the case that it came in was made to look like V's jail cell from the film. I don't usually buy gift sets of films, and I only really got this one was because this is one of the very few movies that I remember exactly where I was when I first watched it. I was in Salt Lake City, Utah, at most likely the Century 16 Theater, and I'm about 80% sure it was that one based on my memory of that day when I was there. And hilariously, that's one of the things that connected myself, like I mentioned before, to Andre from Backseat Directors. So again, shout out to him and the rest of the team from Backseat Directors. So I did have the Blu-ray version of the movie, and I wanted to upgrade it because both myself and my fiance loved this movie. So this version comes with a brand new 4K Ultra HD transfer that does have HDR10, and it was made from the original camera negative. I found the colors were bolder and deeper than they were on the 2008 Blu-ray disc. And one may think that HDR may not do much for this film because it's not a very colorful movie, but I honestly think that it worked well and it gave an almost colorless life to this totalitarian regime. The HDR significantly helps the black levels and keeps V more in the shadows when he's creeping around, which is then contrasted with his white Guy Fawkes mask, which also looks fantastic. Then anytime the color red came up in the movie, whether it was roses, blood, or explosions, it looked amazing. The details were really sharp and vivid, and you could honestly see individual hairs, facial stubbles, and wardrobe textures. The CGI looked really good, and wide shots of the city were so detailed that I remembered what it was like to travel to London outside of the pandemic. I will say there was some noticeable film grain with this movie, but it never really was overwhelming. Audio-wise, this film has a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, which is a big upgrade from the 5.1 Dolby True HD, which the Blu-ray had. For those who have listened before, y'all know that I love Dolby Atmos, and what can I say about it that hasn't really been said already on this podcast or out there on the internet? It's such an amazing experience, and this film was utterly fantastic in this department. The sound effects are robust and loud on all accounts that gives such a powerful punch. Every knife stab, gunshot, and punch to the face sounded fantastic. The explosions and fireworks can rumble your subwoofers and potentially your entire house, but it doesn't feel overbearing. It always feels exactly how an explosion would. And one little thing that I absolutely loved was when either the city speakers or the High Chancellor was speaking, you could hear the sound echoing, and it felt that you were in the situation that the characters were in the movie. And it was truly an immersive experience. And I've said it once, and I've said it 100 times, and I'll say it 1,000 more times. This is why physical media matters. I cannot really express how this feels really while watching a movie like this, but you do not get this from Netflix or anywhere else. Because frankly, I'm even watching The Mandalorian right now, and the visuals aren't as good. The audio isn't as good. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just not as good because you have to have the internet to handle this. And this goes not just with Disney Plus, it goes to Netflix, Amazon Prime. They all have their minimum requirements for it. Then, at least for Netflix, you have to pay extra to get this content. This is why having your own copy of these movies is the best way to experience this. And you can watch this content whenever you want to. Netflix is also doing some things regarding their encoding process of their HDR titles in their catalog. For some reason, they're able to claim that it is able to deliver the same quality of 4K video at half the bitrate. And they stated, and I quote, "For members with high bandwidth connections, we deliver the same quality at half the bitrate on average. For members with constrained bandwidth, we deliver high quality at the same or even lower bitrate," end quote. And they're also increasing their prices for 4K content to $18 a month, plus any of that digital content isn't yours to own. Especially with Netflix, they're able to take that off every month if they want to. And even if you buy content on Amazon or Apple, it's not really yours to own. It's only been licensed to you. Yes, technically, so is the 4K disc, Blu-ray, or DVD, but no one's really going to come knocking on your door to take back the film once the license expires. Digital content, they can remove that whenever they feel like it, really. And okay, that's enough on that rant. Sorry about that. Let's get back to V for Vendetta. So when this film was released, V for Vendetta had grossed a little over $132.5 million, of which about $70.5 million was from the United States. The film was also successful in terms of merchandise sales, with hundreds of thousands of Guy Fawkes masks from the film having been sold every year since the film's release. And with the sale of each official mask, Time Warner gets paid a fee. So there's obviously, with this movie, there are a lot of ideas and themes, with the most obvious being,
people should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
Now, this may not be 100% right, because I think governments and their people should exist happily together. Fear in either direction most likely will lead to violence, as this movie does demonstrate. But my views aside, V basically has this totalitarian government that he has to take down in 1 year and get everyone to believe in his motives. So this film has been disowned by Alan Moore, again, who was the original creator of the story, but not so much about the movie itself, but the deal involving the use of his work. So I have read the original work, and the film does have some differences, the main one being the time of the story. The original story was written in the 1980s and was more in response to the Margaret Thatcher government. This film being made in 2006, it's made more in response to the George W. Bush administration, which obviously drew up some strong parallels with that era. But as of this year in 2020, there are even some parallels with different governments across the globe. Moore has said that his story was changed more into an American-centric conflict between liberalism and neoconservatism, which kind of abandoned his anarchist fascist themes. And I would agree to this point, as fascism is more alluded to in this movie than really said directly. And I mean that in the sense of an ethno-racial purity. While people of color and people from the LGBTQ populations were the ones who were targeted, the movie doesn't really state precisely why they targeted these populations. One can make the obvious deduction, but it's not a direct statement in the movie. Also, the fascist totalitarian characters weren't as humanistic as they were in Alan Moore's version, which was probably due to time limitations, so they had to omit certain details and plot lines and create definite antagonists in the film. The government in the novel has the fascists elected legally and kept in power through the general apathy of the public, whereas in the film, there's this new idea of this, quote, St. Mary's virus, which is a biological weapon, engineered and released by the government as a means of gaining control over their country. So, in addition to that, the main characters were slightly different, as V in the film is a little bit more romantic than ruthless, and Evie's transformation is a lot more drastic in the novel than in the film. And there were some other minor changes to other characters as well, but this episode is not really here to compare the two, more just give anyone listening information behind the film and the slight differences it has. But as with the original novel, the film uses the gunpowder plot of 1605 as V's historical inspiration.
I know his name was Guy Fawkes, and I know in 1605 he attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. But who was he really? What was he like? You tell to remember the idea, not the man. Because a man can fail. He can be caught. He can be killed and forgotten. But 400 years later, an idea can still change the world.
So, interestingly, Guy Fawkes wasn't even the main person behind this plot. The plan was to blow up the House of Lords during the state opening of Parliament on November 5th, 1605. The conspirators part of this plan were Robert Catesby, John and Christopher Wright, Robert and Thomas Wintour, Thomas Percy, Guy Fawkes, Robert Keyes, Thomas Bates, John Grant, Ambrose Rockwood, Sir Everard Digby, and Francis Tesham. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of those names. Fawkes specifically was given in charge of the explosives, and their plan was revealed to the authorities in an anonymous letter on 26 October 1605. When the authorities went to the House of Lords on the evening of the 4th of November, Fawkes was discovered guarding these 36 barrels of gunpowder and was arrested. At their trial on the 27th of January 1606, 8 of the conspirators, including Fawkes, were convicted and sentenced to be hung. And this bit is summarized very quickly at the beginning of the film, but doesn't really go into any of the other conspirators aside from Guy Fawkes, so that's a little bit historically inaccurate. But the film does use some of the conspirator names, such as Rookwood, Percy, and Keyes, as names of different characters in the movie. The film also has some similarities to Alexander Dumas' Count of Monte Cristo. This comparison is quite obviously alluded to in the film, as it
My
is
favorite film, The Count of Monte Cristo, with Robert Donat as Edmond Dantes.
Hurt my sword, Mondego, but your past that disarmed you.
Gets me every time.
May we come up? You find your own tree.
There are some also obvious comparisons to Phantom of the Opera, but I think that's mostly because there's a main character who has a mysterious background with skin injuries in a mask that takes a woman to his abode, which is below the city. I don't think the story aligns so much outside of that, because one is more going for vengeance and the other one's mostly going for acceptance. Even though this film is slightly different from the novel, I think the movie does show a struggle between freedom and the government, and taking imagery most directly from Hitler's Third Reich, Stalin's Soviet Union, and the fictional 1984 by George Orwell. For example, the High Chancellor is mostly on large screens or on photographs in the people's homes. The message of
strength through unity, unity through faith,
is similar to, quote, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, end quote, in Orwell's book. And the government does use mass surveillance on its citizens. The High Chancellor is also played by John Hurt, who is the main star of the film version of 1984. His name, Adam Sutler, is similar to Adolf Hitler, and Sutler does focus some of his previous views on specific religious groups, but instead of Jews, he focuses more on Muslims, because this film was released very close to the events of 9/11. Oh, with some countries being banned for similar reasons to come to the US, essentially due to their Islamic faith, it kind of still applies. In addition, the character Valerie is put into a detention center for her lesbianism and then had medical experiments performed on her, which is similar to Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. There are also some references to an avian flu pandemic, which applied to 2006, as there was a pandemic threat of H5N1 influenza, but also, again, with the coronavirus pandemic happening currently, one can easily see the parallel of this today. Though today's pandemic is not avian, it is bat-oriented, this film can apply not only to US governments, but also to others across the globe. On Rotten Tomatoes, this film has a 73% approval rating based on 248 critic reviews with an average score of 6.78 out of 10. Also has a 90% audience score based on a little over 904,000 user ratings. The website's critic consensus reads, quote, visually stunning and thought-provoking, V for Vendetta's political pronouncements may rile some, but its story and impressive set pieces will nevertheless entertain, end quote. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 62 out of 100 based on 39 critic reviews, indicating generally favorable reviews. My only personal flaw with this movie is honestly the time that it takes place. So it is established that the film takes place over the course of 1 year. How the film progresses, it could be weeks, could be days. It's not really given how long Evie is being tortured by V. There are single lines of dialogue here and there, but it goes by so quickly. It's not really a big deal because the film is extremely entertaining, so it keeps moving. And the ending also, I think, isn't as good as the original novel, but it makes sense with what the filmmakers were trying to do. As with any movie that has a very obviously political tie to it, one may not like the film based on the messages, but like I said, I do think this movie does allow people of different beliefs to enjoy the movie because the action, I think, is really great. And honestly, the story and some of the messages can apply to different points of view depending on your background. And frankly, a movie can still be good even though you do not agree with its messages. 15 years later, V for Vendetta holds up very much so, and honestly, it probably will for many years to come. It has important messages about freedom, fairness, and justice, and honestly, it is one of the best comic book movies, and the new 4K Ultra HD transfer with HDR10 is great, along with the even more great Dolby Atmos. So what did you think of the film, and have you seen the 4K version? Let me know. Hit me up on social media. Formal Review is on Facebook, Twitter, and the Gram. I post many things, including trailer reactions, so go check those out. The handle is all the same. It's at the Formal Review. Feel free to also check out backseatdirectors.com, where I work with a big team to put out movie reviews and also editorials. Again, that's backseatdirectors.com. Please also subscribe to the Formal Review. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're now on Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. Honestly, pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast, we have our content there. Also, I'm always wanting to grow and improve, so please leave a review and what you want to hear, because I really do this for you all. I see the numbers, and I really appreciate everyone supporting me and talking to me about movies, because frankly, that's what it's all about. And for anyone who has supported me on a financial basis, thank you again. And if you want to help support on a financial basis, please go to anchor.fm/the-formal-review and click support this podcast. And honestly, any donation is appreciated. Thank you all again for tuning in. And until next time, wear your mask, wash your hands, stay safe, and take care, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Formal Review. Cheers, and we'll see you next time.